Hello, BookTube and PoetryTube. This is Mike Frost, the postmodern poetry prognosticator, here to do a second installment of a chapbook series, a series of chapbooks that I'm reviewing from the African Poets chapbook, New Generation African Poets box set. Taking them as they come in the box set, just as they come out. I'm reading them and giving a quick response to how I felt about the poems of that day. And today we're going with Armeika by Umniya Najaer, if I can get that in there, Umniya Najaer. I'll read a little bit about who she is to start with. Born to Sudanese parents, Umniya Najaer has made homes in Germany, the United States, and Sudan. She received a BA in African Diaspora Studies and Creative Writing from New Hampshire College and is currently pursuing doctoral studies at Stanford University. So she is interested in writing that deals with oral history and documentation, biopolitics and transnationalism, diaspora and trauma, war and memory, fragmentation and embodiment, and empire and impunity, to name a few. And that interest shines through this very short chapbook of poems, just chocked full of ideas. And as the second installment of this chapbook series, I find myself with a dilemma. I am desperately trying to keep my videos shorter, but there's so many ideas, so much to speak about in this particular chapbook that I couldn't do it in a short video. The only consoling idea that I have right now sitting out here is that I could talk all day about the ideas and the poetry in this chapbook and still not exhaust the subjects that were at hand. So I'm just going to do the best I can at trying to keep these videos short in the interest of doing them on a daily basis and still at least giving some idea of what the contents of this thing is. So you get the idea of what she's enjoys writing about. And I found myself tabbing every single poem. And I had to go back and start whittling through these things to say I can't read all those poems. So I will start with the first poem just to give us a start, and then I'll try to keep this short. But gonna lie already. I have to go through the idea of what America means, because she gives an etymology of the thing in the beginning, and it's important to the understanding of the poems as a whole, because the term comes up again. So there's a series of words that she defines, and then Armeika is a made-up word based on combining a couple other words. So Armeika is a verb, present tense, which means to throw away, to throw you rather. Armeika as a threat is I will throw you or throw you away, and Armeika as a question is should I throw you away? All right. And then you have Amreika is a noun. It is America. It's a way to say America, referring to the United States. So the combination of the two is Armeika, which combines the idea of I'll throw you away or you are disposable, and America. So, and these are not anti-American poems, it's just the idea that America, everything is disposable. It's a disposable culture, which would dispose of anything, including immigrants in this case. But these are not necessarily anti-American poems, or they're not necessarily, just they're not anti-American poems. They deal with the reality of how America is, as an immigrant coming into America, the disposable culture embraces and embodies all of America and all of our ideas, and some xenophobia as well. So that's the idea. That's where Armeika, the word, the made-up word, a combination of a couple of different words. So in this poetry collection, she writes poems that come back. It's really about the immigrant experience. I can't put this thing in a nutshell. It's too much information to be put into a nutshell. But if I can, without trying to do a disservice to the poems themselves, the idea I get through this thing is the immigrant experience. The family's from the Sudan, and even now as we speak, as I'm recording this video, the problems in the Sudan are, I don't know if I can call it resurfacing or staying on the surface. There's just issues in the Sudan that are heartbreaking. So this is a family that's come from the Sudan, immigrated through Germany and come to the United States, but most of it's about the immigrant experience. I feel like I'm doing a disservice because there's so much more in this thing, but all right, so in the interest of time, let's keep pushing forward. So the first poem in this series is, the title is Biat Fardurk Masar Al-Khalik, Ghost House. So there's a footnote here for the ghost house, so I'll read the footnote so you understand it going into the poem. Okay, ghost house are Sudanese security apparatuses and the government's illegal torture houses. The survivors say that these sites are sites where the human spirit is severed from the body, where people are transformed into living ghosts. So she opens the poem in the Sudan, or a poem about what's going on in the Sudan. So it begins. Before it was a ghost house, it was the home of an old widower, the story goes. Not long after he is buried, neighbors begin to hear strange sounds in the night, a wail, a sob, a shriek blooming from the shadow of a whip, a sniff, a whimper. Neighbors think it's the widower's spirit or a cat giving birth night after night. Perhaps stray dogs have nestled in the kitchen. But could it be closer to sobbing? No, it must be nothing. On certain nights when the sky fills with voices from the widower's house, the neighbors say, "This is the work of the devil, Iblis. Even he was an angel once." Whatever the crying is, supernatural or not, it is certainly a bad omen. None of our business. Better to keep our distance. Eventually, the truth comes out. Bashir's security apparatus repurposed the widower's home, converted the master bedroom into the site of Al-Kaif, which is a battle royale of torture, if you will. It's just a mass torture process. The storage room into a cell, the children's play area into a mock execution ground. The widower's home is the site of your torture. Not a place that houses violence, but is itself a weapon. The grounds split at your cranium, the walls usher the lungs' blood and phlegm from the esophagus' pink flesh. The soil is a towel absorbing feces, blood, tears, semen. The ceilings hold the weight of you. The rope of her arms braided into your neck, bloated. The veranda becomes a burial site of plucked nails, ears, fingers, and toes. For years, the ghost house is invisible in plain sight, masked while the neighbors go on hanging laundry to dry quickly before the coffee boils over, stirring warm sourdough and whistling Hamza Dal Doon's tune about a bird whose addresses are dreams etched into the beating wings. Oblivious that just next door, that very tune is your last anchor, a realm between death's cliff and the flesh-tattered dentures of afterlife's shore. By the end of the song and before the coffee boils, you are dead. And you are many men and many fathers and sons and beloveds, and I do not know your names. So begins with a taste of what many of these folks in the Sudan and other places around the world. This is a series that I'm trying to educate myself on African poetry, but this sort of ghost houses are not limited to Africa or the Sudan or Africa. This is unfortunately around the world, which makes these poems and so many other aspects of these poems too, because I feel like I'm going to do a disservice trying to keep this short, but these things resonate about our world more than just what is in Sudan or what is in Africa. these sorts of things, this immigrant experience, this what drives people to flee their own country, the experiences they have in fleeing their own country. This is not limited to the Sudan, although these poems are about that. It's obvious that this poet recognizes the universality of this pain, of this experience, which is evident throughout with all the poems. So I really wish we could spend all day with this, but nobody would pay attention to me all day. Matu is a poem where she basically channels her father, which, all right, so this is a thing that I work on between what is colonial poetry, what is post-colonial poetry, and I'm formulating ideas that hopefully these sorts of readings will help me with post-colonial thought. But in a colonial thought, there's a lot of reaction against what the colonizers did. And to understand an immigrant experience, to understand the immigrants in any country, United States or England or anywhere in Europe, understand that these folks are fleeing the destructions of their homelands that were perpetrated by colonialism. So it's a lot easier for the colonizers to work through these issues because they're one entity. Usually they're usually blamed on a country, but it's more or less companies, East India Company, these sorts of companies that go in, so they can be single-minded in purpose, which is usually just to take all the raw materials out of the country. And they go in and they divide the population, which, in fairness, had its own divisions. But they exploit those divisions and create mass violence where once there might have been sporadic violence. They create mass violence in order to divide the cultures. And then they bring in cultural extermination techniques. Some of it can be blamed on bringing in missionaries and stuff like that, but I'm not trying to get into that area. But they destroy the culture. They break the culture down into pieces. They divide the people and create excuses or mechanisms for mass violence versus sporadic violence or cultural or tribal issues turn into civil wars. And then when they leave, these occupants of these lands no longer have their own culture, own cultural values, own cultural mechanisms to deal with the crisis that is now upon them. And in order to save their cultures, and a lot of times they have to leave the very land where their cultures were born in order to preserve what culture they have, because it's being wiped out in civil wars or famine or whatever else is left behind after the colonists leave. So these, which is a great deal why people here in the United States, we complain that they don't assimilate into our culture. Well, a lot of times they're fleeing here, which sounds strange because we're a part of the problem. But it's the only place where they can preserve anything that's any remnants of their culture. So they don't come here to assimilate, they come here to preserve their culture long enough for what's going on in the aftermath of the departure of the colonists in order to reseed their culture. So it's a very complicated issue, extremely complicated issue that these poems bring to light and really bring home in the course of just reading through these poems. See if I flip to another one here. Crossing the Ocean is Not What Anyone Expected. Heartbreaking poem. Should I read that one? See how long it is. Okay, so a heartbreaking poem about a widower. They immigrate here. Her husband's a doctor in the country that they leave. He comes here. He passes away. And the widow is left with having to deal with that death in a non-traditional way. That her culture would expect 40 days of mourning, where you sequester yourself for 40 days. And family and friends, they come and they cook for you. You're basically sequestered. There are other communities popping to mind as the Jewish community has a mourning period after which there's some sequestering. And so there's cultures that do that. When you're immigrating to another country that doesn't hold those same cultures, and especially America, where she points out very poignantly, so she can't mourn the way she would in her own country. She can't sequester herself for the 40 days that is natural, which makes you feel like you're doing a disservice to the person that's being mourned. So you feel that guilt of the disservice. But as she points out here in America, because this is far from home, who will bring in the girls home from school? Who will buy the groceries or pay the rent? I don't have days, not 40 days, to sift through my marrow, nostril deep, and return the scorpions to the desert. So I lock the door behind me and I take the kids for Happy Meals. We only have an anchor of each other's grief. So it goes, that experience of having to deal with life's issues in a foreign land where you don't have the support of the community, you don't have the cultural anchors that you're used to, that you were raised with, that is part of your tradition. But because, and I'm not, again, this is not an anti-American tirade in this poems, it's about the experience. It's about, no matter where if you were in England, it would have been the same thing, because the British don't have the same traditions as the Sudan, or France, or South America, anywhere where they don't have the same traditions. You're having to deal with your, in this case, grief, but it could be any other the major life events, births, where you're celebrating births in ways that aren't part of your tradition, and it sets you adrift. And only someone that goes through that can truly experience it. But these poems kind of bring it home to you. And I already see I'm going longer than I really wanted to with this, but I could talk all day about the poems that Umniya Najaer has written in this very short chapbook. The ideas that come across it. The last poem in there, just to give you an idea, the last poem deals with female castration, which is, I've talked about that in a previous video where I read Alice Walker's Possessing the Secret of Joy. That idea that this sort of thing still exists today, that it's still there, it's just mind-boggling to me. So many things you could sit here and discuss all day in a chapbook that is so chock full of more ideas than I get in whole collections of poetry. My hat is off to Umniya Najaer in this collection of poetry. It comes from this box set, the 2018 New Generations African Poets Chapbook set. Wow, people, this is the second day, the second chapbook that I've pulled out of here, and I can't wait for the next one. I will speak to you as soon as I get there. I'm trying to keep it short, folks, but this is, I feel like I've done such a disservice to this particular chapbook, but in the interest of keeping this short, folks, I will try to recap. Maybe I'll talk more about them in my Friday reads when I talk about the other readings, which I am about to start. I had a few things I've got to clean up, finish up from my July TBR, but then I start in on my August in Africa TBR for the writing. I put that in my introduction video, the books that I will be reading. So I'm really looking forward to that. If there's anything like these chapbooks or anywhere near the quality of these chapbooks, I will be amazed and quite a student here. So thank you for tuning in. Please go over to Rashmika's channel. I will link her videos below, her channel below. Phenomenal person from South Africa who's already started her videos in this thing, and she's far more intelligent and articulate than I, so please see her channel, and if you have a chance and you see another one of these hashtags, August in Africa, please come back and join me. Thanks, BookTube. Thanks, Poetry Tube. Have a great day.